An article that came out August 29th, 2017, today. ABC News, I'll leave the link to this article in the description box. Sessions, drug overdoses, top lethal issue in the U.S. All right, so let's go ahead and listen to this video.
Hi, everyone. Amna Nawaz here live in New York. We have a very special preview for you now of a new report, a special edition of Nightline airing tonight. Check it out and check your local listings to make sure you don't miss it. It's called One Nation Overdose, and it's an incredible look across the country at exactly what's happening with regards to the opioid crisis in America. With us here in the studio, ABC's Chief Justice Correspondent, Pierre Thomas, who is the man behind this incredible report. Thank you so much for being here.
Good to be with you.
And this report is just incredible in its scope, in its depth. Tell me about how you guys went about digging into the crisis.
Well, we decided that we would take a snapshot, look at 7 days across this country, because what we've been seeing just anecdotally from stories and from data that we've been getting from the DEA and law enforcement has been of great concern. Mm-hmm. You have a crisis that seems to be getting worse. The DEA and the Justice Department just recently put out some numbers that suggested that in 2016, early estimates are that at least 60,000 people died of drug overdoses. The overwhelming majority were from opioid related deaths. Mm-hmm. They believe that's what's fueling this crisis, and it has now been deemed the deadliest drug epidemic in American history.
And some of the numbers we've been hearing about are so striking. I know Attorney General Jeff Sessions testified that one American dies every 11 minutes of an overdose. You mentioned, and you've talked about this with your colleagues here as well, that it just keeps getting worse, and we don't quite know why. What did you find? Because you really went across the country. Is there something specific to every region, or is there some one problem underlying the cause here?
It's a convergence of a number of factors.
Yeah.
Number one, Americans continue to overuse painkillers. Mm-hmm. Then you had something very nefarious and sinister that happened. The Mexican cartels started to notice in recent years this insatiable appetite that the country has for opioids. Mm-hmm. So they decided to create heroin that is much more pure and make it cheaper. And as a consequence of that, you can now smoke heroin initially or take it in pill form. And that took away the stigma for some first-time users who were afraid of needles. But the dirty little secret is that over time, many of those people end up on the needles. Now you inject something called fentanyl, which is a powerful painkiller used to treat cancer patients. And the Mexican cartel got involved in that, as did some unscrupulous companies in China who have been shipping it to the United States. And the fentanyl is so toxic to the touch, or even if you breathe it in, it can cause an overdose. So now you see law enforcement putting on bubble suits like you would see in dealing with Ebola before they go into some crime scenes.
And that's just standard procedure for them now.
If they think that there's amounts of fentanyl that are lying free, mm-hmm. that could get on your clothing, they will recommend that people put on those suits.
How are law enforcement officials in particular responding? What is it that they say they need in order to better combat the crisis?
Well, you just saw the president announce that he's going to make this a national emergency, mm-hmm. This drug crisis. So you should expect to see more federal funding available. We were out with the DEA. Part of what I did with the special is I went to Phoenix and spent some time with the DEA out there, and just to witness how they're trying to deal with the problem. And what struck me about that is we're out with them as they're tracking what they believe is a suspected drug ring. And we're there as they make arrests, mm-hmm. and they're sort of confiscating drugs as they go throughout the process. And the headquarters, where they make the final and key arrests in their estimation, turns out not in some location that you would expect. It's a working class neighborhood. And all of a sudden, the DEA and the Tempe police go in, conduct this raid, and they walk out with 15 pounds of heroin valued at more than $1 million.
You and your team reached out literally to all 50 states and the District of Columbia to report this out. You partnered with an amazing network of our colleagues at ABC affiliates across the country, too. What stood out to you? You gathered individual stories. Do any of those kind of stay with you? Did any surprise you that you learned along the way?
There are two images and stories that kind of are haunting. One involves a young woman who had a 4-year-old daughter, and her family thought that she was rehabbing in connection with pill addiction, and she ended up overdosing and dying of a heroin overdose. The other is a story where one of our producers is down in Florida, and a call comes in to an EMS worker that she's with, and it's about a woman who's overdosed outside of a shopping center, a strip mall. And to see the care and the tenderness that the emergency worker uses in literally bringing that woman back from the brink. And she literally was on the brink, where they had to inject her with Narcan to get her heart and get her breathing again, was both chilling and triumphant in a way, because that worker did his job to help save her life.
In the course of your reporting, you come across the story of 10-year-old Alton Banks, I believe his name is, as well. Tell me that story, because that one, the details are just startling.
It's a bit of a mystery, but this little boy goes to the swimming pool, comes back home, gets sick, is later rushed to the hospital and dies. And the preliminary results is that he somehow came in contact with fentanyl, and they don't quite know how. At least that's the latest reporting that we have. And he's gone, a 10-year-old boy.
And it's still a mystery. You communicated with the families, of course, of those who've lost loved ones, who've come very close to losing loved ones. On a personal level, do people see that they are part of some larger national epidemic, or is it just because they're so in the moment? This is really about family to family, how they're struggling with it.
Well, one woman, the woman who died of the heroin overdose, whose family thought that she was dealing with a pill addiction, there's an emotional moment where her mother points out that it's painful, but that she doesn't want anyone else to go through what she's going through. And I thought that was pretty powerful, to have the strength in your own grief to be looking out for other people. And the one thing they said, the only good thing that came out of it is that her daughter was an organ donor.
Now, you mentioned this is a 7-day sort of scope, right? July 17th to the 23rd.
7-day snapshot, yes.
Did you pick those dates for any reason at all?
Anytime. We could have done it any time. And the numbers are so concentrated in terms of what we're seeing. And, also spend some time for the digital side of things with some fire and rescue workers in Phoenix. And their stories were chilling as well, where they talk about case after case after case where they're reviving people. And they basically see no end in sight. But I think the one lesson to draw from this is that we all have to do a better job of informing the public. And I would encourage family and friends, anyone, to watch what we're doing, because I think the American public has a sense that something bad is happening out there.
You hear so much about it, right? About the crisis over and over again.
Right, but they don't really understand that it's much closer than they think it is. That the prescription drugs that you're using could be a gateway for at least some people to try heroin, which is cheaper to buy and has a similar impact on the brain, to fentanyl. And for some people, once they start down this road, we talked to an expert yesterday, and I'll never forget, he said, these drugs cause a chemistry change to the brain that create the closest thing to the loss of free will that he sees. That it's not because these people are evil, it's not because they're bad, it's because their brain is literally changed to crave and need what it needs so badly, to the point where they start making just really, really poor judgments. And some of the images that we gathered before we started our 7-week period of time, some of the producers found these images, in the last year and this year, which are just striking. One involves a man who's on a public bus, and the bus has a surveillance camera. And all of a sudden, you see this man, so look around to see if anyone's looking at him, slips in and injects himself with what authorities think was heroin.
Right on the bus.
On the bus, a public bus. And then moments later, you see him basically overdose and fall head first into the aisle, and everybody's wondering what's happening. And that image is one that reminds you that this problem is reaching a point where it's spilling over into public life.
And there are so many of those images in this report, some incredible reporting for the congratulations on this, Pierre. Thank you so much for being here.
Hopefully it'll help.
Today as well. And thanks to all of you for watching as well. Remember, you can watch that very special edition of Nightline tonight, a special report called One Nation Overdosed. Thanks for watching. And you can always check out another deep dive online too. Go to abcnews.com/Nightline.
All right. Okay, as you heard, they have a documentary that'll be going on Nightline. I might try to catch it and see what it's all about. Attorney General Jeff Sessions on Tuesday called drug overdose deaths the top lethal issue in the U.S. and urged law enforcement and social workers to create and foster a culture that's hostile to drug use. Sessions spoke to the annual conference of the National Alliance for Drug Endangered Children. He said preliminary data shows 60,000 overdose deaths in the U.S. in 2016, the highest ever. Our current drug epidemic is indeed the deadliest in American history. We've seen nothing like it, said Sessions. Yeah, we know that. He highlighted Department of Justice efforts to curb opioid abuse, including a pilot program announced August 2nd to send 12 federal prosecutors to cities ravaged by addiction to investigate healthcare fraud and opioid scams. At one point, he accused Hollywood, the media, and government officials for sending mixed messages about the harmfulness of drugs. He didn't name any government officials. This is not acceptable, Sessions said. We must not capitulate intellectually or morally to drug use. We must create and foster a culture that's hostile to drug use. In May, Sessions reversed an effort from the Obama era. That's only because it's coming from Obama. I noticed that he and Trump focus heavily on anything Obama put in place. I don't know why they're so obsessed with that. To me, it's stupid. But let's move on. Obama-era Justice Department that called on federal prosecutors to rein in on the use of long mandatory minimum sentences for some drug criminals to focus resources elsewhere. Sessions is now directing prosecutors to pursue the toughest punishment against most suspects. That's not going to change the drug culture in America. But, they think any little effort they make, I guess maybe it makes them look like they're doing something. Again, if you are not going to tackle the drugs that are pouring into the country and you're going to focus on all these other things, you can count on the fact that this drug plague will never be killed. It is alive and well. Please tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. Peace, family.